繼續。
Let's continue with our hearing. Next, Mr. Michael Tian. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry I was late. I'm not sure whether or not each of us will have 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Or 10 minutes, if there is time, we can have a second round. But then I was once given more than 10 minutes, right? Well, that's the practice and procedures. So let me explain it to you, Mr. Michael Tian. We have members responsible for asking questions, and I do have the discretion allowing them to have more time. All right, it's okay, so I'll have 10 minutes. Chairman, as we all know, the delay of the XRL will be up to 2 years, and one of the main reasons is because of the rock excavation works at the WKT, and I mentioned this at the last hearing already. Well, let me share with you. All right, we have a table here, and I'm sure, Chairman, you must have seen it, and you all know this very well, right? If you look at this table, it shows very clearly that if you look at the entire WKT, we have the northern part and the southern part, and the southern part is 810B, and then the northern part is 810A, and there are two parts. And for the blue part here, so that's the bottom-up approach, and then for the yellow part, that's the top-down approach. So let me recap the historical background here. Back in 2013, on the 22nd November, when they came to this council to explain things to us, that's what the Bureau Director said. Well, the WKT, well, for the main excavation work, they have completed more than 61%, and then for the southernmost end, it was up to B4, so that was 810B. And then for the northern part, well, they were already up to the lowest part of the terminus, that is B4. So that's the blue part in this plan. Okay, so when they came in November, they explained that the part outside of the yellow and the blue part. So that had nothing to do with that. So that's 810B, that's the southern part, and they said that they were already excavating up to B4. And as you know, well, it's very quick to build buildings. So the only difficult part would be the excavation. So, and then he continued, he went on to say that for the 810A, that is the blue part, they already reached B4. And after listening to that, even if I was not an expert, I would trust it. Because if you are looking at a bottom-up approach, and if you have already excavated up to B4, then everything is fine. Because when you build things, how can you not be completing that in 2 years? That's why, at the time, we inclined to believe that for the 2015 completion data, that could be met. So that was in November 2013, all right? But then, the most interesting thing about this is about 810A, and there is this yellow part. And that's where the problem is. So the cause of death was in the yellow part. Well, in that area, that's under contract 810A, that's the top-down approach. So that's the top-down works. So in this project, it turned out that in the paper submitted to us back then, there was no mention whatsoever. And I tried to dig out the paper, Director, and I tried to dig out the paper dated November 2013. There was no mention whatsoever about this yellow part. As everybody knows, there was some 100,000 cubic meter of granite which was buried beneath. And still, they hadn't even started the excavation, and there was no mention about it whatsoever. So, Director, given the circumstances, you supported the conclusion by the MTRCL that 2015 was achievable. So my question is very simple. Well, given the fact that the MTRCL should not have told you about this yellow part, this top-down works progress in November last year, right? And if there was no mention whatsoever, that's why you did not mention it in your paper either. So the MTRCL and the government were telling the Hong Kong people that they would be able to complete the works on schedule. And the most challenging part was not mentioned at all. So it's as if that it was not there. So looking back, would you think that the MTRCL was deliberately trying to deceive us? Mr. Lau, Chairman, I don't have the paper with me, but then as Mr. Michael Tian described just now, I believe that at the time we might not have comprehensively described the progress. In fact, concerning the northern part of the XRL project in WKT, in fact, part of it was already reached B4. So it's a top-down works, and in the middle part they already reached B4. If we could have had a comprehensive description of the progress, that would have been better. Director, sorry for saying this because I was very mild in asking the question. Well, you had the yellow and the blue part, and in your report to us, you only mentioned the blue part, so I don't have to repeat that. But then, well, for the blue part, yes, it's a bottom up. You already reached B4. Of course, you would be able to complete it on schedule. But then for the yellow part, it's a top-down project, and you hadn't even started it. And in the report by the MTRCL, all right, it contained 100,000 cubic meter of granite. All right, it's not simple. It's not a simple task. So would you think that they had deliberately tried to deceive or hide it? Well, we will have to look at the paper submitted back then. All right, I just read it out to you, and the paper was completely silent on the top-down part, and neither was there any mention about the size of the rocks to be excavated. If I judge it on that basis, then I think it's not fair to the MTRCL, because in fact, other than submitting the paper to this council, there might have been other papers which would also describe the situation back then. As to what the situation was like back then, well, if you ask me to make a judgment, I'll have to read the relevant documents before I can come to a conclusion. Well, I'll have to stop the clock now. So can you confirm that well, when you submitted the paper to the RSC, you did not mention the yellow part with 100,000 cubic meter of granite, and you hadn't started the excavation? Well, I don't have the paper with me, therefore I'm not able to confirm. Definitely not. There was no mention whatsoever, Chairman. Director, just now in your reply to us, you said that even now you are not in a position to judge whether or not they had deliberately hidden something from us. So can you go back and look at the paper? So can you refer to the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of June? It shows that the MTRCL did not mention anything about the yellow part, the top-down project. If that is the case, then would you think that they had deliberately hidden something from us? Chairman, before the hearing, I already mentioned that the government is still looking at the entrustment agreement in considering the duties or responsibilities of the MTRCL under the agreement, and to determine whether or not it has discharged all its duties. And if we detect any problems, then in accordance with the agreement, we would go after it. So if I were to express my opinion on this now, then that would affect our action to go after the MTRCL for responsibilities. So at least you have given a response. So in determining whether or not they had deliberately attempted to hide it from us, you said that it's not appropriate for you to comment. Then I would be prepared to accept it. My next question for you, Director, this is your responsibility, all right? You knew full well that at the time when you approved the awarded the contract, all right, in the yellow part, there was a lot of granite, and you were aware of that. So did you know that there was 100,000 cubic meter? So you have been supervising this project for such a long time, all right? By November 2013, we all knew that. So the MTRCL was aware of that. So did you know about it, Chairman? With regard to the northern end of the WKT, concerning the rock stratum and the and the volume of rock, we were aware of that, and the MTRCL was aware of that. So you were aware that there was over 100,000 cubic meter of granite beneath it. So if you knew it, then in November 2013, when you came to this council, you did not mention anything about the 100,000 cubic meter of granite, and you were not aware of the progress. But then today, you told us that the Highways Department was all along fully aware of the fact that there was 100,000 cubic meter of granite. So this is a very serious matter. So how did you discharge your role as a checker? Because I didn't know it at all, because I was thinking that you were led by the nose by the MTRCL. You did not know about the details, and they told you that, well, everything was okay, all right, there was rock, but then they would be able to do it. So now you're telling us that you were fully aware of the 100,000 cubic meter of granite, but then you did not mention it at all at the November meeting, and you just assure the Hong Kong people that you would be able to complete it on time. So on what basis could you have that confidence? Mr. Chairman, first of all, on the volume, I have to clarify it. Well, in May, when the MTRCL submitted a paper, there was a supplement, and they said that there was some 70 to 80,000 cubic meter of granite, so they were aware of this figure. When did they tell you? That was in May 2014. Chairman, I was asking about 2013 precisely. The question is, what is most problematic was that, well, it exploded in 2013, so everything broke out. But then when monitoring the works by the MTRCL, well, basically the deadline was November 2013. So by November 2013, if the administration said that they were aware of the fact that there was 100,000, 70,000 or 80,000 cubic meter of rock beneath it, and they did not mention it, and they were confident that they would be able to remove the rock on time, then I think that's really problematic. Mr. Lau, can you clarify it? Well, back in 2013, we already discussed with the MTRCL as to how we can speed up the removal of the rock stratum. And at the time, the MTRCL also said that, well, in the DRMs, they would try to use blasting to remove the rocks. So there was some discussion on this. But then for such measures, it would require the MTRCL to implement them. Well, Chairman, let me understand it. All right, when you came in 2013 for the blue part, you spoke loudly that you already reached B4, and that's why for the bottom-up project, you said that just trust me. And now on the yellow part, you're telling us that both you and the MTRCL were aware that there was some 100,000 cubic meter of rock there, but that you did not mention it, and you just trusted that for this top-down project, they didn't start work yet. So they didn't even start works. And still, miraculously, you said that in a few months or a year's time, they would be able to complete it. So that's your view in monitoring the project. Is that the case? Well, can you answer the question more precisely? Well, as I said just now.
We knew that there was this issue of the rocks, and we were discussing with the MTRCL, and we knew that they were studying whether they would use blasting to speed up the work process. Well, how come that you didn't mention that in the November paper? It was silent on this issue, and you asked us to trust that you could do it because you were already down to B4. Obviously, for the yellow part, no excavation had started yet, right? If the information was incomplete at that time, I think we needed to improve on it. We were discussing then with MTRCL on the delay recovery measures. Next one, Mr. Lee Chak-yan. I would like to follow up on the last question posed by Mr. Tony Che and yourself. Well, you said that you only knew about the delay when the MTRCL announced the delays. Exactly which date and what time did that happen? Can you clarify that? Chairman? I do not have a clear memory of the dates. The MTRCL and the Secretary, after the flooding, well, April 2014, right? They made a public announcement. In our previous papers, we also mentioned that in the previous Saturday, the CE of the MTRCL called up the secretary, and on the same day, the MTRCL colleagues also called me up to relate the same piece of information. The 12th of April, Saturday. Well, there is exactly where the question or the problem lies. You are a key person in the whole matter because you are checking the checker, the MNV consultant is monitoring the risk, and you are also the chairman of the PSC, and you held monthly meetings. And from the report starting from 2013, you've seen delays stretching from 8 months to 11 months. But what I found most weird is that you have not been making a professional judgment and said that, well, this is very problematic. Well, last time and this meeting, you also said that you knew about the delays, but then there may be recovery measures. And the chairman asked, is it the case that you think that 11 months delay could be recovered? And it seems that you trusted what the MTRCL said. They said that it's okay. So you seem to be playing a very easy role in your checking the checker. You trusted whatever the MTRCL told you. They said that it could be recovered, the delay, and then you trusted them. Where is your own professional judgment? Well, we should take another perspective to the role of a checker. Say, if the MTRCL now tells me that there is going to be another delay, should I be trusting them again and then making a public announcement? Well, that's what you did in April 2014. And all along, you've been believing in them. Well, that's what happened exactly in April 2014. I wanted to point out, Chairman, that we need objective facts to help us to ascertain whether they were speaking the truth. We would not trust them immediately. Well, if they told us delays, there are delays. We would not trust them immediately. What we are asking for is a revised work schedule so that we can assess the whole situation, so that we can assess the feasibility of the revised timetable. We need some objective evidence or objective facts. Well, looking back, can you think about this? They have been reporting to you that there are going to be delays and recovery measures will be undertaken. Now, looking back now, is it the case that you thought that the recovery measures could work and then the delays could be recovered? Was there a mistake on your part in making that assessment? Well, ultimately, we couldn't recover the slippage. So where does the responsibility lie? Is it because you have committed a mistake in your own judgment? Director, we need, as I said, we needed objective facts to ascertain whether the information of MTRCL is true or not. In fact, we've been monitoring their work and the slippage of the works, and we will get all the information and make our own judgment. So you seem to be saying that you have been trusting the reports of MTRCL until, well, the day in 2015. Well, actually, because you've been trusting them and you've been trusting that they could recover the slippage, and that's why you didn't report to the police or the Legislative Council the possible delays. You've been accepting everything they said to you. Well, we didn't accept all the information they provided. After we've got information from them, sometimes we cast doubts and asked for further information to prove what they said or their undertaking. We noticed that in some MTRCL's internal documents furnished to us, in November 2013, the MTRCL asked the contractors to revise the timetable on this partial opening option. And the report pointed out that the contractors used 5 months to do the study, and then in March 2014, the contractors told the MTRCL that the timetable was not unachievable. In my opening remarks in the first hearing, I did say that at that time we didn't have sufficient information, and it would be very difficult for us to make a judgment. WKT station was a big project, and it would be very difficult for us to make an assessment on the project ourselves. Looking back, I could have asked the M&V consultant to do an independent assessment. Although we weren't sure that the information was sufficient, we didn't consider that at that time. And as in my remarks last time, I said we could have done a better job. So, November, you should have realized the fact that the delays could not be caught up, and then why that you waited until April 2014 before you announced the delays. And also you said that you didn't agree with the partial opening option, and then you were allowing the contractors to study this partial opening option. Well, I don't think I have I'm not sure whether I've heard you right. The MTRCL has allowed 5 months for the contractor to study this partial opening. But you said that you didn't agree to this partial opening option. Why? Were you allowing the MTRCL to let the contractors to do the study? Well, this is a partial commissioning or use of the WKT station. At that time, the MTRC's proposal was that, well, in the opening stage, 10 tracks should be commissioned, but for the partial opening option, 6 tracks would be commissioned, but still full service could be provided. At that time, the government didn't agree to this proposal, but that didn't mean that the administration objected to that proposal, because the MTRCL had not provided sufficient information. So we were asking them to provide more information. To my understanding, the MTRCL was asking the contractor to study the option of partial opening of WKT station. Well, I don't know what your stance is. You said you didn't agree, but then you were not objecting to it. So what's your role as a checker? You were allowing them 5 months to do the study. You seem to be very arbitrary in your stance. Chairman, the WKTC is a massive structure. We could not revise the proposal, say, in 1 or 2 days' time, and we needed the MTRCs to come up with a revised proposal before the government could consider whether to accept it or not. In responding to Mr. Lee's earlier question, I wanted to quote the Secretary's response earlier, and they would give them the benefit of doubt. Well, we didn't have concrete information to say that that would not be achievable, but then in November, MTRCL did ask us for more 6 months, which was quoted in my earlier documents. They asked for 6 more months so that they could come up with a better timetable. And during those 6 months, we have been repeatedly urged them to come up with a revised works schedule and to tell us specifically whether the commissioning date is feasible or not. So, Chairman, I don't understand your role. Well, if that is what happened, then you might dispense with your role as the checker. because every time you are giving the benefit of doubt to the MTRCL, and you are disbanding your power to monitor them altogether. In my statement presented at the last hearing, I've set out clearly our role as the checker. We are doing our monitoring work through a multi-tiered monitoring mechanism to ensure that the MTRCL discharged its responsibilities under the entrustment agreement in taking forward their project. And if there are delays, then we would urge them to implement DRMs. Mr. Lau would like to follow up on the same question. From your evidence, I understand that in accordance with the agreement, the government, through yourself, has monitoring role in this project. But now you are telling us that for many issues, you didn't have sufficient information to make appropriate assessment, and some information was not provided by the MTRCL, and you've asked them to present a new proposal, and they were procrastinating on that. And as to whether some DRMs were feasible, the contractor took 5 months to come back with a response. The administration is a party to the agreement, and you do have a monitoring role. Why is it that you have such great difficulties in obtaining information for your assessment and monitoring work? Chairman, I would like to clarify one thing first. You said that the MTRCL had not provided the necessary information to us. Well, I had to clarify on that. In paragraph 36 of the statement, it is said that in the MTRC's own report, it is stated that such information was withheld from us. Well, I'm not talking about this. I said that you didn't have sufficient information to do an assessment. Of course, the MTRC itself had sufficient information. If you hadn't enough information, how come that you were not trying to obtain such information from the MTRCL? Well, you were asking for a proposal. They didn't give you in time, and you didn't have sufficient information, and they didn't provide it to you. So you could not play the function of a checker under the agreement. Well, that's my answer is no. Why couldn't we do it?
Okay.
Because in coming up with a revised work schedule, well, that's the case for most projects. It would involve the contractor discharging his duties under the contract. And yes, there is slippage, and should it be the contractor's responsibility, or is it that the MTRCL has not provided something? So sometimes we have to clarify the responsibilities first, and therefore in recovering the delay, who should be responsible? That's why in the course of such discussions is about the management and execution of the contract, and we have to look at the details. We also have to discuss with the contractor as to what their responsibilities should be. And if we are not able to delineate the responsibilities, then we might not be able to come up with a reasonable work schedule. And even if we are able to do it, then it might have to be us doing everything. But of course, we would not want to do that, and therefore it's the contractor's responsibility to recover the delay, and that's why they will have to be responsible for coming up with the DRMs. So it's not about the responsibility, it's about the getting hold of information. You have a contract with the MTRCL, and the MTRCL also has a contract with its contractors, and therefore in trying to get the information, you can do it through the MTRCL in order to discharge your role as a checker, right? And if the MTRCL does not have the information, then at least it can get hold of the information because it has its contractor. Chairman, if we need information, then definitely we can ask the MTRCL for such information. But then what I was trying to point out was that in coming up with such a revised work schedule, it's not just about getting hold of some information and then we'll be able to do it, because it involves the MTRCL and its contractors' responsibilities under the contract. And if there is any delay or slippage, and if it's the contractor's responsibility, then in coming up with the revised schedule, then part of the job would have to be undertaken by the contractor. In fact, it's true for many projects too. Well, in discussing the issue of responsibilities, it would be rather time-consuming because the contractor would normally not admit that they had to be held responsible. That's why, in coming up with such schedule, it would involve looking into the contract, and also between the MTRCL and the contractors. Given their contract, we would have to analyze a lot of the information before we can delineate the responsibilities. So it's not something that can be obtained outright, because the MTRCL would also have to discuss it with the contractors. Charles Peter Mock. Thank you, Chairman. Well, my question has also been delayed. I can see that all along the THB, in submitting information to this council, when it comes to the reporting by the MTRCL on the delay in the XRL project, in fact, from the very beginning all the way up to the second part of 2013, actually, basically, every time they were telling us that there was a delay. So, well, when the project started in 2010, you might be talking about minor delays in tendering and so on. There might be a month's delay and so on and so forth. But then as the time moved on, the delay grows. So for an ordinary man looking at such things, and when it comes to project management, whether there is delay or overspending is very common. So Mr. Lau, as you said just now, you said that these are very common happenings. But of course, it doesn't mean that they would inevitably take place. But then all along, your attitude seemed to be that you were focusing on catching up with the delay. Of course, this is a very positive attitude. But then when we engage in different project management, very often we would see such situation arising. You also cited some examples, and in some cases you were able to recover the delay. But then in this case, all right, it's like losing a score in the first few minutes, and then as the time goes by, you are losing more. So apparently you are not able to catch up at all. So my question is, in dealing with this project, you personally, in terms of your attitude or the handling culture, is that you are trying to give the MTRCL the benefit of the doubt? Is that your attitude, or is it that you would come up with a worst case scenario, and then based on that you would look at public interest? For example, the slippage really cannot be catch up. In fact, in most cases, it would be more likely than not that you would not be able to catch up. So considering it from the public interest perspective, in most cases, you will not be able to catch up. So if the administration really wants to recover the delay, that's fair. Just now, I mentioned the mindset or the mentality. So have you ever considered the possibility of not being able to catch up, and the impact would be more serious in different respects? So you should have looked at that from that perspective instead of adopting a more relaxed attitude in dealing with this. And at the same time, have you done any assessment as to the possibility of recovering the delay? They said that they would be doing it. But then, have you considered the achievability of their counter-proposal, and is there any contingency measure? Because throughout the hearing just now, apparently you said that it would be kept on the list of concerns, and then you would continue to keep an eye on it. So apparently the list will grow just longer and longer. So can I give him some time to answer the question? Chairman, I think the biggest public interest is in the scheduled completion of the XRL. That's beyond doubt. That's why we were trying our best to put pressure to bear on the MTRCL for it to complete the project on time. That's why it's not true that we were sitting back and doing nothing. We were not folding our hands without taking any action, as we have said in our statement. In fact, we did push the MTRCL to try its very best to catch up with the delay. In fact, in the independent expert panel report commissioned by the government, the MTRCL did take measures to catch up with the delay. I'd like to know, all right, they have come up with some DRMs, and the consultant might also have assessed it. But then, as the M&V consultant talk about the delay, well, their assessment was somewhat longer than what the MTRCL said. So, had you done any assessment? That is, even with their best endeavors, they might not be able to catch up. So, have you looked into that? So, if that should happen, what is the contingency measure? At any stage, did the Bureau or the government, did you have such consideration? Instead of just asking them to do their best, because this is the biggest public interest. Of course, we all know that. But then, even with the best effort, they might not be able to do it. So, at what stage did you think that it was not achievable, or was it that all along you believe that they would be able to do it? Well, Mr. Mok, well, the question that's been asked just now, it's not true that we just trust the MTRCL. We did check the objective data furnished by them. As to whether there was any contingency plan, well, in the event that the MTRCL can come up with a revised work schedule, in fact, after the delay has taken place, if they are able to come up with a revised schedule, then that would be the best contingency plan. By that we mean that if they are not able to do it on time, then when will you be able to complete it as soon as possible? I believe that that's what we are trying to achieve. That's why we've been asking them to do it. And in coming up with the revised schedule, in fact, we are trying to do two things. Number one, it can show that they can complete it on time. And if they are not able to do it, then with the revised schedule, it would show when they can complete it. Then, after they have submitted that plan to us, well, like they have now come up with a revised schedule, so we'll discuss it very seriously with them to see if this is indeed achievable, or is it the best that they can do. So that's why, focusing on this, we have been working on it too. Chairman, well, when these problems emerge, well, with a long delay, then of course, on the part of the MTRCL, they have delayed it for a long time before they came up with the revised schedule, and the M&V consultant might also have given some comments. But then the ball was being passed from one side to the other side, and still the ball stays in the court of the MTRCL, and the objective fact was that all along they have not been able to catch up, and in the end we are now faced with this situation. And as you said just now, by 2013, you started to doubt their ability to complete it on schedule. In fact, you have not been able to come up with a very conclusive decision or conclusion that they would definitely not be able to do it. So you give people the impression that you only started to suspect at a very late stage. Still, you were not sure. So objectively, looking back on this process, in your view, was it the problem of the system? As a result of the systemic problem, for such problematic incidents, it's difficult for the administration to check on it, or the system is susceptible for an institution like the MTRCL. So the system is susceptible to manipulation by the MTRCL, resulting in such situation, because as you said, there's no way that you can do their job on their behalf. You can't just tell them as to what they should be doing. So you will have to rely on them doing the job. So is it that in terms of the power in the system, there was an imbalance, and as a result, you had this situation? So in reviewing the situation, what's the biggest problem in your view? Chairman, I believe that there is no system that is perfect. In every system, there are always loopholes and shortfalls. And under the system, in fact, that's based on the MTRCL being able to complete the project. And that's also based on trust to a certain extent. Because under the entrustment agreement, so there is an element of trust in it. That's why it has to be based on a certain extent of trust on the MTRCL. But then we didn't just trust them. In fact, as I said in a statement, there was a series of multiple layers of checks and balances in order to ensure that the MTRCL would be acting in accordance with the EA to implement the project. But then, as I said just now, well, no system is perfect. That's why if the MTRCL, in discharging its duties, had problems, then we do have some monitoring measures. But then, as to whether or not we'll be able to comprehensively identify the problems that might leave something to be desired. Mr. Mock, all right. Even if I pursue this further, I might not be able to get the answer. But then, looking into this, it seems that I'm not going to say that the government is incompetent at all, but then apparently under the system, you've been led by the nose by the MTRCL, and under the entrustment agreement, the MTRCL, well, the M&V consultant apparently did play a role, but then under the system, his views might not have been taken on board right away, and as a result, the situation just got worse. Thank you. Next, Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. Throughout this morning, the director has been describing the situation as if he was fighting a long war. But then I think the director has to confirm this. In fact, you've not been fighting a long war. Every year, we've been giving you $130 million, and you've set up a team headed by a chief engineer with 4 or 5 senior engineers, and there were some 8 to 9 engineers, which is a dedicated team to help you in monitoring the project undertaken by the MTRCL. So my question is, when you started to see that there were slippages in the project, in your so-called monitoring meeting, when you received such information, did you instruct your dedicated team so that they would look at the slippages as reported by the MTRCL, and also the way to catch up with the delay? So did they look into that in depth to find out whether the DRMs would be technically and engineering-wise or objectively feasible? Would they be achievable? So I'd like to know if you have given such instructions to your subordinates so that your dedicated team will get you the information.
Mr. Lau, Chairman, if you pinpoint whether I have made such instructions at an exact day or exact time, I couldn't give you the information. I think it's all part of our work. Our role is to monitor them and to make sure the information they provide was reasonable and that the DRM measures were effective. As mentioned, we held meetings once every 2 weeks internally, and we discussed several railway projects, including the XRL project. We discussed the delay situation, and we discussed our efforts to ensure that the DRMs could catch up the delays. Mr. Wu, Chairman, could you tell us your working relationship with your dedicated division? Did the dedicated division present you with any reports on the fact or in their views that the DRMs of MTRCLs might not be effective. They had doubts on that. Have you ever received such reports? As said, we did discuss these issues in our regular meetings. We also discussed what efforts had MTRCL made. Some measures might be more effective, others not. So we did have that kind of discussion, and I depended on my dedicated division to implement the multi-tier monitoring mechanism. So it's not just myself who did all the work. My question is, has he received any reports from your dedicated division? I'm sure you would be asking your division to help you scrutinize the information, or they could proactively come up with reports to alert you to certain issues. Can you tell us how you work with the dedicated division? Meetings are held once every 2 weeks. Well, I want to barge in a bit because we are focusing on the XRL project, but the bi-weekly meetings that the director mentioned to cover all railroad projects, I had to talk about these bi-weekly meetings because XRL project is one of the railway projects we supervised. At these meetings, colleagues would present some updates on the XRL project, and then we would have a discussion. The reports mentioned by Mr. Wu Chiwai might be verbal reports in these meetings. I might not be able to dig up the written reports. Well, anyway, we did discuss such issues at our meetings. Did you have any records of the meetings? No, just updates were included. Chairman, I would like to know, under the entrustment agreement, the government has the right to obtain information, any kind of information, during the XRL construction project. Have you encountered any difficulties in getting information from the MTRCL? Chairman, the MTRCL might not give us the information instantly, but in most of the cases we were able to obtain information from them. As mentioned in my paper, the MNV consultant reviewed several hundreds of documents to try to ascertain the responsibilities of the MTRCL. Chairman, I would like to follow up. Chairman, Director, at the MPSC meeting, you saw that there have been accrued delays to the project, but then you are still just relying on the DRMs proposed by the MTRCL, hoping to recover the slippage. On such DRMs, have you instructed your dedicated division to verify or scrutinize the effectiveness of the DRMs and also their cost effectiveness? Director, in formulating the DRMs, there was an approval process. And in that process, the MTRCL will give us all the information and documents, and such documents will be passed on to the MNV consultant. And then we would give views, and the MNV consultant would also give views. This is a standing mechanism. The DRMs, after they are implemented, will become part of the project. They are subject to the scrutiny under the mechanism, the monitoring mechanism for the project as a whole. So we do not need extra monitoring mechanism on the DRMs. Well, let me pause here. Mr. Wu's question mentioned about DRMs, and the DRMs have to be approved by yourself. And the parties which are approving the DRMs include MTRCL, yourself, and the MNV consultant. But what Mr. Wu is driving at is whether you have asked your team and the MNV consultant to conduct an independent assessment of the DRMs. It's not just sitting down together with them to discuss these DRMs, but rather an independent assessment of the effectiveness of the DRMs. So, Chairman, I just divide the discussion into the two periods, i.e. before the DRMs were implemented and after the DRMs were implemented. As a standing measure, we would be looking at whether the DRMs are effective, and then we will come up with a comment or suggestion, and perhaps later we will ask the MTRCL to to improve or fine-tune it based on our discussion or study. So after the DRMs have been implemented, then they become very much part and parcel of the entire project. And for the entire project, we do have these established monitoring mechanism. So the DRMs are subject to the scrutiny of that mechanism. At the PSC meetings, it has been shown that the delays are getting more and more serious. And at the PSC, there is a representative from the THB. Can you tell us who is this THB representative exactly? And when he or she saw that there were delays, was he obliged to report such delays to the Secretary for Transport and Housing? And in view of such delays, Director, what is your role, particularly in terms of reporting the delays to the STH? I think the THB has provided us with a paper on the role of the different colleagues on the XRL project. The project spans a long works period, and actually different colleagues have participated in the PSC meetings. I am not from the Bureau, so as to his role, I'm not in a position to give a reply. Mr. Wu's last question. We do have the responsibility to report on the progress of the project to the Secretary, especially when there are delays. As said, we have monthly meetings and discussions are being held on such progress. The Director said that he has provided such reports to the THB. Can such reports be provided to us? That's number one. Number two, can we confirm that for every PSE meeting, a THB representative is there? Perhaps for one or two meetings, the THB representative might not attend. With regard to the provision of papers and the earlier stage of the hearing, we also mentioned this. The documents you asked for were really internal documents furnished to the Bureau, and the Select Committee is now discussing with the Bureau on whether such information can be provided to the Select Committee. To my understanding, the Bureau is inclined not to give the information. I think it's best that the Select Committee follows up duly with the Bureau. Director, you would depend on two channels to report on the discussions at the PSC, to report the progress of works to the the bureau. So these two channels are, one, through the representative sitting on the PSC, and second, your report submitted to the bureau. Right. These are the two channels. You said that there are some meetings where the of the PSC where the THB representative was absent. Now, if the THB representative was not present at a particular meeting, would you be compiling special reports on the meetings and present them to the bureau? No, we didn't do that, but the progress was updated or given at our monthly meetings. Can you provide us with information on exactly which meetings where the THB representative was absent? Can you provide us with a response in writing later? Yes, we can provide a written reply in writing. So much for my question. So second round, Ms. Claudia Mo. 10 minutes again. Chairman. We can give more detailed thoughts on the timing or the chronology. Well, for whatever question we asked, well, it seems that the director has been given the same answer all along. Now, repeated use of the words of giving the benefits of doubts and so on and so forth. If we go on like this, then the hearing is not very meaningful. The director mentioned all the time about objective assessment. Well, as an ordinary member of this citizen, I don't find that acceptable. It seems that this individual is held entirely responsible for the mistake made in this mammoth project, and he's been giving us the same answers repeatedly. And also we get the feeling that the government overtrusts the MTRCL, and you are giving them the benefit of doubt. Of course, we try to be more lenient to people in a way in our daily lives, but then you are giving too much benefits of doubt. You're giving them too many benefits, in a sense, and you just ask them to revise the deadlines when they cannot be met.
In your reply to one of my questions, you said that if there's something wrong with the schedule, then they can come up with a revised schedule, and then afterwards that would become the best option. So it's like what Charles Peter Mock just said. So apparently you would just take the word as it is, and then you would just give them a bit of a push, asking them to catch up. So all along you've been trusting them, and then if it doesn't work out, then you would have meetings elsewhere, and then after a while you would say that okay, you would just give them the benefit of the doubt until such time when the MTRCL couldn't make it, and then they had to come out to say that sorry, there would be this delay. And then you said that yes, the government was aware of this delay, and therefore you are announcing this to the public. Yes, everybody can have the benefit of the hindsight, and you can be the smartest you can. You can always say that one should have do this and do that. But then looking back during the past couple of years, in terms of the management, well, at the management level, you said that you were not fighting a lone war. And you said that, you had this multi-layer checks and balances, and we are checking the checker. But then you said that, they made this remark and you just trust them. And then you see how it works out. So now we have to set up this select committee, and for the whole morning on this Tuesday, we have been repeating the questions, and we have been getting repetitive answers. So whatever we ask you, I can't really come up with a way that I can continue to put questions to you. The only thing that I can see is if I ask you, Mr. Director, personally, in which respect can you have done a better job? And you talk about the multi-layer monitoring mechanism. In which part can it be improved? So that's question number 1. And question number 2, I'd like to follow up on what the chairman just said. You said that you know very well that there was already this 11-month delay, and still you're thinking about catching up. And that's really not a very significant piece of information. So at this juncture, at the critical juncture, would you admit that the government, I would not ask you to admit mistakes. I understand that there might be problems, but then would you admit that at this juncture, there was a gap? Had you been able to report it in your reports, then it would have been somewhat better. So can you tell us that? So this is my second question. Well, have you inadvertently withheld some information from us? So have you inadvertently withheld some information from us? And the third question is relating to what Mr. Michael Tian just said. All right, you knew very well that the northern end of the WKT, whether it's 70 or 100,000 cubic meter of granite, well, all along, you've been saying that there was this mutual trust. This is an entrustment agreement, so you use the word trust. But then, so I'm entrusting you in doing this, and of course there is a basic trust. But then they have not lived up to your trust. And so have they refused to provide information to you? So all along you said that on most cases you've been able to get what you wanted, and you would have to go back to check as to whether or not they withheld information from you. But then with regard to the 100,000, 80,000 or 70,000 cubic meters of granite, you did not write it down in a paper. So in terms of the provision of information, you did not mention it at all. You repeatedly said that you trusted that the MTRCL would know about it, and they would know where the improvements would be needed. So I think we had this major problem. All right, it's like a guy trying to commit a crime, and then you're like a social worker trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, and you're trying to counsel him. But then at least at a certain juncture, you should have alerted other people who might be affected. For example, their parents, his parents, his friends and relatives. You should have told them that he might have some problems. You should have disclosed that. So all the relevant parties should be alerted instead of making no mention at all about this problem. Yeah, well, you will have to give him time to answer the question, Mr. Lau. Chairman, on the first question as to where we can do better. In fact, at the last hearing, in my opening statement, I already made 2 points. I don't think I need to repeat them. I believe that in those 2 areas, I could have done better. As to the issue raised by Mr. Michael Tian about the paper that we provided, that there was insufficient details. Well, if it's as described by Mr. Michael Tian, then in that regard, we might not have provided enough information. Then that's something that we can do better in the future. It's not just about whether or not you can do better. It's about whether or not you have hidden something from us. Well, have you hidden something inadvertently from us? First of all, I'd like to say that there is definitely no question of us hiding anything from you, even inadvertently. Well, before April 2014, actually there were 7 occasions when we came to this council to attend meetings of the RSC, and we submitted 7 reports. And looking back, during this period of time, the MTRCL was still able to maintain the schedule of completing the project in 2015. That's why in accordance with the situation on the ground, we came here to report to you about the progress. But then in November 2013, that was the last meeting, when members put questions to me, I already said that, well, that's recorded in the minutes. Other than the cross-boundary section, for the remaining sections of the XRL, well, it's also behind schedule. That's why we have adopted different measures in order to try and catch up with the schedule. That's why what we said then was reflecting what was happening on the ground. Chairman, that's not really an honest reply. All right, you insisted that, it's achievable to complete it in August 2015, and you were reporting to us in accordance with the situation on the ground. But then you're talking about tons of granite sitting there, and you talk about blasting. How long would it take to complete the blasting and removal? So you knew very well that it was a very big problem. Still, you insisted that it's not a big problem, and the situation on the ground was okay, and you still insisted that the scheduled completion was achievable, and you would not be announcing the delay. Well, this is not really a question. This might be your conclusion, and we can discuss that later. Ms. Mo? In fact, I also forgot that I haven't used my time yet, so I'll just ask a simple question. Well, I can see that director, both at the last hearing and this hearing, in the evidence that you furnished or adduced to this select committee, and also in your statement, you refer to the independent board committee's 2 reports, as well as the IEP's report, and you made some response to those reports. So my question for you is, concerning the 3 reports, would you like to give a further response to them, other than the response that you have already made on them? Chairman, thank you for your question. Well, can I add one point? We would be studying the IBC's reports by the MTRCL, and also the government's IEP's report, because they've also come up with some arguments, and we would be looking at those arguments that is under the EA in terms of the responsibilities of the MTRCL. Have they discharged their full duties? And we would also be seeking claims against the MTRCL. Well, with regard to the 3 reports, other than what you have said, do you have other response? No, nothing else. Because in the statement, we have already referred to the government's IEP's report. We have already given a very detailed response to that. Next, Tony Chair, asking in the second round. Thank you, Chairman. Director, in the first hearing, you said that for general projects like this, there would be delays, in particular for civil engineering projects, in particular when it involves excavation of ground. Well, the chances of delay would be quite high. And you also said that concerning the Hong Kong section of the XRL, including the WKT and other locations along the line, the construction would be rather complicated. So I'd like to ask you this. All right, in September 2010, you took over the post of the Director of Highways, and since then, have you ever considered, or have you ever done this? That is, have you reviewed the entire ground conditions of the Hong Kong section of the XRL? So in the site investigation, was there anything wrong? And if there was, then, or if there wasn't, then have you taken any follow-up action? And if you have, what actions have you taken? And if not, why not? Chairman, generally speaking, for those of us engaging in projects, and if we need to get ground conditions information, then we will have to do it before the start of the project. So to conduct a review, that would mean that we will have to do a new round of site investigation before we can have further information to conduct the review. So according to my understanding, the MTRCL before the start of the project already did a large amount of site investigation works. As I said in the paper, over 600 drill holes were made. So in the course of the project, in accordance with the project requirement, they would also carry out a more specific site investigation on the ground. So according to my understanding, the mechanism was okay. So if you just rely on me, I cannot do the site investigation myself. We will have to rely on the contractor engaging in the project, because all the work sites had been handed over to the contractors already. So there was no independent site investigation done by the government alone. So in doing the site investigation, that's one thing. But then in the past, you said that, all right, some 600 holes were already drilled. So did you review the situation? Was that adequate? Was 600 holes adequate? Well, back in 2010, I did not do such a review. Well, our team doesn't just rely on myself. Well, some describe me as fighting a long war, but then the whole team was aware of the situation. Thank you. So, Chairman, can I ask this? While the works are underway, in fact, subsequently there were further reviews. And in terms of the site investigation, there were inadequacies, and as a result, further site investigation was needed. Was that right? I don't quite get it. You said that back in 2010, you were of the view that there was no need for further site investigation to be conducted. Well, Chairman, initially when you asked me, you said that when I took over, what was done. So I was only referring to the situation in 2010. But then were there further site investigations afterwards? Well, as the project gets on, well, under the contract, we understand that there were further site investigations, because by the time when the contractor took over the work site, very often they would also needed to do some further site investigation, because the site has already been handed over to the contractor, and therefore the contractor would have to find out what the ground conditions were before they could take appropriate measures to procure appropriate machinery for the piling works and for the diaphragm walls and so on. In other words, Director, what you're saying is, so the contractor would act in accordance with the contract. So he would do what he is required to do under the contract, and then for the department, you would not be looking at the site investigation result to decide whether or not there needs to be further site investigation. You did not ask them to do further site investigations, right? Well, at the time, before the award of the contract, we would have to review the situation. So in other words, at the planning stage, we would have to review the situation. In other words, there was a review, but then it was done before the planning, right?
If Mr. Chair would like to have more detailed information, I'm afraid I have to provide it afterwards. Chairman, I would like to ask the Director this question too. The Highways Department, in relation to the XRL project, have played an important role in monitoring the project. Director, in discharging your duties in the past, do you believe that there is room for improvement in certain areas, in particular for yourself, in discharging your own duties? What is your assessment of your own performance, and also for your team in the past several years, up to April 2014? Has it conducted any value for money assessment Director, what assessment were you talking about? Value for money assessment. Whether the team has been performing properly. Well, question related to my team, and also a question on yourself. Chairman, I've answered that question already. In the first hearing, in my opening remarks, I mentioned several points, so several areas where improvement could be made. Today, I also mentioned one point. If the reports submitted to the Railway Subcommittee are not detailed enough, then we could do a better job. And I think I have the responsibility in this. Last time I also mentioned another area. Though we couldn't conduct an assessment on the WKT project, should we be asking the M&V consultant as an additional responsibility to conduct an assessment of the WKT project? We didn't do that at that time, and my team didn't raise it either. So it has to do with the work of the entire team. I could not pass on the blame to my team. I am the leader. Well, even if my team couldn't come up with an idea, I myself wasn't able to come up with that idea, and it was my responsibility. And also, with regard to communication, I had to shoulder certain responsibilities. If the communication was not working properly, then I had to take the blame as well. With regard to value for money study or assessment, for civil servants, we do present such appraisals. The director just now said that looking back, there are areas which could have been where improvements could have been made. And director, one of your duties is to ensure that the project is completed on time. In this regard, do you think there is a dereliction of duty on your part? And how much responsibility should you shoulder on that front? Well, ensuring the completion of project on time is one of our objectives. As said, we do it based on our established mechanism. In the last hearing, I think that I mentioned there was room for improvement in our work, but I don't think that for myself and the Highways Department there was any dereliction of duty. Let's look at the facts closer. As I said in my opening remarks last time, the main reason for the delay was that we encountered unforeseen circumstances, for example, in relation to the conditions of ground and inclement weather, etc. According to the entrustment agreement, the highways is responsible for monitoring the project. And in accordance with the EA, we have done the monitoring role, and we are not standing in the way of MTRCL proceeding with the work. So the specific works of the Highways Department in monitoring have been set out in my written statement. It is divided into two parts: monitoring and verifying that the MTRCL is taking forward the work in accordance with the established mechanism and the entrustment agreement. And the MNV consultant has also conducted a number of reviews, and no irregularity was found. And when delays were identified, we urged the MTRCL to implement the DRMs to catch up with the slippage. So this is what we have been able to accomplish. The IEP report also acknowledged that the MTRZ was taking proactive measures to try to catch up with the delay and ease the delay. And on this front, the Highways Department has been working hard to urge the MTRCL to do DRMs. And another role of the Highways Department is to coordinate with other government departments and resolve issues between MTRCL and the government departments in the course of the construction work. So this is what we've been able to achieve. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, second round. I have two questions. I have a question for the THP. THP has given us 7 reports. What kind of approach did you adopt in compiling these reports? Is it the case that the director, you would collate the information and then hand it over to the THB, and then the THB would pass on the information to the electrical, or is it that the THB compiled the report on their own? For the reports, we will first ask the MTRCL to provide information on progress of works, and then based on that, we would be compiling the report to the Railway Subcommittee. I noticed that in the minutes of the PSC, it showed that the situation or the delays was more serious than that described in the report to the electrical. So is it the case that you were not relying on the PSC reports and then to compile your report to the THB, or rather you would be asking the MTRCL for information, and then based on that you compile the report to the THB and thereafter to the electrical? Concerning the PSC reports, well, the information therein should be sort of digested in a way before it is suitable for inclusion in the reports or papers to the bureau or electrical. So we will look at the individual piece of information to see whether it is suitable to be included in the report. So can the director be clearer? Is the PSC report used as the raw data for your compilation of the report, or you would be relying on another report to be compiled by the MTRCL for drawing up your report to the electrical? We are relying on the MTRCL's separate report, not on the PSC reports. So in other words, for the documents for the electrical, it was the MTRCL which would compile the report and then submit them to the THB and thereafter to the electrical. Yes, that's the case. The MTRCL did participate in that way. Director, did you participate in drawing up the report submitted by the THB to the Legislative Council? Did you play any role in that? The dedicated team, my dedicated team, would work on it, and if needed, I would also be involved in the compilation. So is it the case that the THB ask you and then you will help out in preparing the report? Well, let me put it in a better way. The papers were submitted to us by the THB, and for whatever we submit, we have to be responsible for them. For my team does most of the work, and at an appropriate time, then I personally would be involved as well. Chairman, my question is the basis, the raw data for such a report. As MTRCL, right? Yes, I just want to confirm the point. It's the MTRCL which provided the raw data. In other words, the MTRCL came up with a skeleton, and then your colleagues would be taking part in the compilation work, and then the report we submitted to the THB. I just want to be clearer on the flow. In my first response, I said that the report was compiled based on the information provided at MTRCL. So the information would not be exactly the same as that we found in the PSC reports. Is it the case? Like what I mentioned? I don't think they would be similar or the same because these are two separate reports. Well, I'm talking about the content, the basic information. In other words, the information for the PSC report, will that be taken away from the report submitted to the THB? Well, we are talking about a 6-monthly report, a report once every 6 months. But for the PSC, the reports are a monthly report, so the two reports are different in that sense. And then we would be coming up with an overall account of what happened in the past 6 months for the report for the THB. I asked this question is because the PSC reports show clearly that there have been accrued delays in the project. Director, why is it the case that since the PSC reports have shown clearly that there have been accrued delays of the project, the information is not included in the report provided on a 6-month basis to the THB? Why is it not included? Well, our report shows the overall situation at that particular time. Mr. Wu referred to the delays. We know about that, and in my earlier remarks, I said the same. And we identified delays starting 2013. We've been pressing the MTRCL to do something, and in May they shared with us the DRMs, and we see that they are really putting effort into recovering the delays. So that's why, based on this, we come up with the report. Do you agree that no matter how hard you press the MTRCL, I mean, the delays are still getting more serious and serious? Well, at the same time, we see that work was being done by the MTRCL. If I may be allowed to give you more details, in January 2013, we started asking the MTRCL to revise the work schedule, and in May, they came to us and explained to us that there were problems with the tunnels. And they proposed this, that they would buy another machine to install the tracks, and then the track installation time could be shortened. So they've been addressing this problem. As to the question of the West Kowloon terminus, they undertook to study it further, and in August, September, they came back with some explanation, and they said they proposed this partial opening option for the WKT station. Without a full set of information on hand, we asked the MTRCL to further study such a proposal and then give us their assessment. We saw that might be an option for recovering the slippage. They suggested that the 6 tracks should be completed in advance, and they were situated in the middle of the station. As I mentioned, the rock stratum at the north end of the station is in the letter of a U shape, and then the middle part, there was less rock to be excavated. So if the excavation on that part can be finished earlier, then the 6 tracks can be put there, and then the partial operating option was could be feasible.
You're repeating your answer again. Yes, what I was trying to say was with regard to the delay, there were some positive measures, and we could see that they were also coming up with some positive measures. Chairman, I'd like to follow up. We noticed that, well, at the PSC meetings, the MTRCL has been telling the administration or telling the director that they've already put in place some DRMs. So at such meetings, well, concerning such a DRMs, were there very detailed discussions, and were they recorded? Well, for the PSC's meetings, well, the minutes already recorded the detailed discussions that took place, and of course, not all the DRMs were discussed at the PSC because we had a multiple layer of meetings. First, we have the review meetings and also the coordination meetings. That's why, with regard to the delay in the works, well, at one of the three levels or three tiers, it would be discussed, right? So, were there records of such discussions? Director, well, one meeting does not have records. So that's the contract review meetings. So there would not be any minutes. But then probably that would not be discussed at the CRM, right, on the DRMs. Well, the CRMs would be reviewing the delay in every contract and also what problems there were. So there would be discussions. So for the DRMs, that would also involve the contracts. Chairman, let me ask one more point. Well, on the DRMs, Director, you're not sitting at every meeting. So under what mechanism are you grasping the situation with regard to the DRMs? Director, Chairman, as I said just now, the DRMs are under a scrutiny mechanism, and of course we were involved, and our M&V consultant would also review it and give his comment, and in the process we would find out what their suggestions were. If those involve very major measures, then they would also have to come to us to give us a detailed explanation. As I said, in May 2013, well, in the tunneling section there was some delays, and they proposed that one more machinery be procured for the laying of the tracks, and they did come and give us a detailed briefing. What about before 2013? Well, in the established scrutiny meetings, those would be scrutinized because it's a permanent established mechanism. So can the director tell us that you would have avenues available and there would be records to show that for each and every DRM what they in fact were? Chairman, I personally cannot possibly understand each and every measure, but then my whole team would be looking at each and every one of them, because under the scrutiny mechanism or under the verification mechanism, they will have to submit a paper to the mechanism for scrutiny. So my whole team has knowledge about each and every DRM. So you might not be doing it personally, but then under you have a dedicated team, and it would be kept fully abreast of what is done. Yes. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lau, for coming today and last time to assist us in our work. And if there is a need, then we will invite you again to come and give us evidence. All right. You may now retire. So the next hearing will be held on the 28th of April at 9:15, again at this room. So please move on to room 4 for a closed-door meeting. Thank you.